some telephone calls for you, beginning with Chicago. You are on the air for Minister Farrakhan.
Mr. Farrakhan, I would just like to say that you have done a very good job for the black people, and keep the good work up.
Thank you so very much.
You have a question as well, just a comment. All right, we'll let it stand. Hendersonville, Tennessee, good morning to you. You're on the air.
I appreciate it, Susan. I appreciate Minister Farrakhan taking my call. My name is Bill Powell from Hendersonville, Tennessee.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Farrakhan, I'm so disappointed that you use your great stature among the black people to divide the races, to poison the relationship between whites and blacks, and to do everything you can to place enmity between us instead of uniting us. Now, you said, and it's been widely reported, and I heard the tape exactly, that you said that white people, and George Bush particularly, you blew up the levees in New Orleans to kill and displace black people. And, sir, this kind of rhetoric, just with no proof or no evidence, you know, and you get away with it, and you get to come on C-SPAN and places like that, whereas a person like David Duke or one of your counterparts that's white would never get this kind of treatment and say these kind of things that you know in your heart are totally fallacious and untrue. And I just don't understand why you do that to divide the races when you could be such a uniter and get us together working. We got enemies outside this country, and I hope you're not one of them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. First, let me say this, that we visited New Orleans, Dallas, Texas, members of the executive committee of the Millions More movement, to talk to Mayor Nagin. And at that time, Mayor Nagin said that there was a 25-foot crater under the levee. In the Wall Street Journal, there was a mystery that was raised about whether a barge broke the levee. And then on the Hal Turner show, which some of those researchers sent to me, the comments that were made on his show, it was that some member of the Army Corps of Engineers went in under the water and saw burn marks on concrete. And he took that concrete, according to this article, and sent it to a friend in the Army Forensic Laboratories. And they came back with 2 different types of explosives that are military type explosives. Okay, maybe that is a rumor, but if it is a rumor, sir, there are black people and white people in the 9th Ward that believe that the levee was bombed or destroyed purposely because Hurricane Katrina passed. The eye of the hurricane had passed, and reporters were standing in the French Quarter saying, sir, that we escaped the wrath of Katrina, while at the same time, a day or so later, the water came. Now, my question, sir, if it is a rumor, the Holy Quran says to us, whenever there's a rumor that is believed and is being spread, then those in authority who can search out the truth of that should go to work and either dispel the rumor as fiction or prove it to be fact. And sir, if you would go and get a book by Mr. John Barry, not a black man, John Barry, he wrote a book called The Rising Tide. And in that book, he said, white people, rich white people in 1927 compromised the levee and flooded the 9th Ward. I didn't write the book, sir, but I know that there are those who hate the poor. It is not Farrakhan that has divided the races. Farrakhan did not set up Jim Crow. Farrakhan did not set up white only. Farrakhan did not set up separate but equal. Farrakhan did not set black people in the 9th Ward and relegate them to poverty. Farrakhan did not pass by black people on the roofs of houses begging for help. I talked to a respected white lawyer the other day in Los Angeles, Mr. Tom Mesereau. And Mr. Mesereau said, Farrakhan, if the people on those roofs had white skin and blonde hair and blue eyes, I do not think that they would have suffered what they suffered. 4 hurricanes hit Florida last year. There was significant loss of property, but not significant loss of life. It is not I, sir, who is dividing the country. It is what I saw on television from New Orleans a few days ago. 4 white cops and FBI beating a 64-year-old black man and then lying that the man was drunk and the man had not had a drink in 24 years, and the police union is defending that kind of behavior. That is what is polarizing black and white. So thank you for your question, sir, but look deep into your own heart and remove the beam out of your own eye before you attempt to remove one that you think is in mine.
The same John Barry that Minister Farrakhan references has an op-ed piece in today's New York Times after the deluge, some questions. And in the blowout it says, he writes, it matters why the levees broke. He says that there have been 3 credible teams that have been sent to investigate it. And this is what he writes. After inspecting the levees and reviewing storm data, all 3 investigating teams agree. Hurricane Katrina hit Lake Pontchartrain with far less strength than it did the Gulf Coast, and the storm surge fell well short of the tops of the levees. In fact, a design or construction flaw caused them to collapse in the face of a force they were designed to hold. In other words, if the levees had performed as they were supposed to, the deaths in New Orleans proper, the scenes in the Superdome, and the city's devastation would never have taken place.
So what this shows is neglect on the part of the federal government, because those levees were weak, and the people of New Orleans were asking the federal government for $12 to $14 billion to rebuild those levees. That money never came, but we found $340 billion to put on a war which we found was on the basis of a lie. Something is wrong with this picture, and the American people are awakening, and they need a change in government.
Our next question for you comes from Atlanta, and you're on the air, caller. Good morning.
Good morning. First, I would like to greet America with Assalamu alaikum. I'm a caller out of Atlanta, Georgia.
Alaikum salam.
Walaikum salam salam. First of all, I wanted to say that Allah has set for us, as individuals, our own awakening, no matter what that will be that's going on in your life. However, it is up to our own individual selves to wake up. And I think that as a people, as black people, and as the human race, period, because we all came from Africa and out of the womb of an African, I pray that we all wake up. And first of all, I'd like to clarify, Minister Louis Farrakhan does not promote racism or racial divide. However, he promotes awakening and awareness. And perhaps to some whites, that would be a threat. And I could see how some of them could think that it would be a threat. You got a bunch of black people marching and walking and stirring up all kind of things. But actually, it is for us as a people to awaken, and for perhaps the world to awaken. And it should not be taken as a threat, but as a movement. And it's sad because we don't march anymore. We don't fight anymore. We have become so tired and so lame and so sad, but it's time to get out of that, and it's time to wake up as a people. And once Black America wakes up, the world will awaken. And I thank you. Again, I greet you. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Let me say this, my dear sister, that the Arabs were asleep, and God raised Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, to speak to them, because we cannot awaken from mental lethargy or sleep without truth. And that is why Jesus said, ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. In the time of Moses, the children of Israel were asleep mentally and spiritually, working as a slave under Pharaoh. but it was God's intervention raising Moses that spoke truth to them that awakened them. And the scripture of the Bible again says, how can they know except they have a teacher? And how can they have a teacher except he be sent? Someone has to speak truth to us to awaken us out of a deep sleep, that we may take control of our destiny and do better by ourselves. And I think that is part of my responsibility. Thank you for your question.
Rixeyville, Virginia, good morning. You're on the air for Minister Farrakhan.
Yes, Mr. Farrakhan, you were speaking about the Jim Crow laws and all of those laws that were in the South. I'd like to remind you that those Jim Crow laws have been gone a long time. I was raised in the South. My parents taught me that it is the character of a person that counts and not his color. But you brought it up. I saw white people helping black people in New Orleans. And why is it that you only criticize the federal government where clearly the local and state levels had difficulties also? I know that today, I was an educator for 16 years in Virginia, and I know that there are many educational opportunities for all people today. I see your message as being very divisive. I believe I heard you speak some time ago against interracial marriage, and I felt that that was very racist on your part.
Thank you. Miss, even though the laws that were in force in Jim Crow have been gone for 40 years, the systemic racism that black and brown people suffer is very, very real. Otherwise, we wouldn't have to march again. We wouldn't be pleading for justice if, in truth, that which spawned lynching and Jim Crow were not alive and well in the courts, in the economy, in the churches, in the schools. No, America needs a complete overhaul. And you, too, must wake up and see that systemic racism must be dealt with. And if we are not willing to deal with it, then we will suffer the consequences of the rise of people who know that injustice lives in America, and this will be the undoing of the greatest nation in the history of the last 6,000 years. Our problem is not outside. Our problem is an internal rot that is on the inside that comes from injustice, racism, sexism, and government that lies to the American people.
Mr. Farrakhan, as you explained the construct for the movement, you talked about involving scholars across religions. The Anti-Defamation League has released a press release that criticizes the speakers for the Saturday event, saying that they include several noted racists and anti-Semites on the extremes. That's from Abraham Foxman, the ADL National Director. Would you like to respond to him?
I wouldn't waste my time with Mr. Foxman. This is not about the ADL. It's about the suffering of black and brown and poor people in the United States. He's upset because so many of us have come together in spite of his anger at me and others. Black people see that our suffering and our needs are greater than the things that they might disagree with me on, or we disagree with each other on. We are putting our disagreements aside to address the horrific condition of our people. For that, Mr. Foxman should applaud. I don't think I heard Mr. Foxman jump on the former Secretary of Education, Mr. Bennett, for his remark that if you wanted to remove crime, just abort black babies. Let Mr. Foxman address that.
Next telephone call from our audience for you comes from Boston. Good morning. You're on the air.
Minister Farrakhan, what do you think about the mass incarceration of nonviolent drug offenders and over half the prison population being black men? And do you think they should have an amnesty program? And what do you think about the embargo on Cuba?
Sir, the prisons are now on the stock market. People don't invest in prisons if you don't expect a profit. The choices for us in the inner cities is very limited. If we join the armed forces, we have the choice there. But when manufacturing is ceded to third world cheap labor markets and factories close down in the inner cities, then the black, the brown, and the poor white are left in the lurch. Last year, 44%, according to what I read, of all those who graduated from high school were unable to read at a high school level. That's 44%, black, brown, red, yellow, and white. Now, where will those 44% find a future if there are no factories? Just before I came on this program, there was a caller who said we need to bring those jobs back to America. The garment that we used to wear 30 years ago, you could see in the back of it, made in America. The shoes that we used to wear were made in America. But today, practically everything that we are wearing comes from a foreign market. So when America, the greatest industrial nation in the world, cedes industry, manufacturing to third world countries and becomes a service-oriented economy, and even in that, India and Malaysia and other countries are benefiting, while the poor are not being retrained to fit into this kind of economic structure, then we have a problem with prisons, we have a problem with drugs, we have a problem with crime, and we have a problem of managed mayhem herding black people, brown people, poor people into the prison industrial complex and into a new form of slavery. And that's why we're asking for all of us to come together, to mobilize, to organize, and to form a movement that will change these horrific realities.
Next question, St. Louis, you are on the air.
Yes, I've always wondered, there's a large group of people in the world that were also enslaved for thousands of years, and they experienced prejudice in America, and that's the Jewish people. And I'm wondering, why not take the approach that they did to solving the problems to overcome, because they have so few problems in terms of, poverty and crime, and I think they rely on each other and they demand excellence from each other. And big thing is, I never get the feeling that Jewish people hate non-Jews or blame non-Jews for the problems, and I'm just wondering, why not take that approach?
Well, that's exactly what we're attempting to do. When we call black leaders into a room and we look at the horrific problem of our people, and we determine that we are going to unite to ease the suffering of our people, it is people like Abe Foxman who sees in that a threat, because I am considered anti-Semitic. I want the world to know I am not now, nor have I ever been, a hater of the Jewish people. I am critical, yes. I criticize black people, but I don't hate my people. I criticize white people, but I am not a hater. I criticize government, but I am not a hater. And what this is an attempt to do is to silence critique. And if you silence critical analysis of government, of race, of institutions, then you silence the voice that could bring about change. So yes, that is our attempt. Our attempt is to address our problem from within ourselves. And those who feel threatened by that, then Who threatened the Irish? Who threatened the Italians? Who threatened the Jewish people when they from within themselves rose in this country? But they happen to all be white. We are people of color, and maybe we need to check out the systemic racism that exists, that feels fearful when a man like me and black leaders get in a room to decide that we are going to take responsibility to clean up our act and make ourselves whole and wholesome, whether government helps or not.